The NBA Finals are fully underway, and there's no shortage of headlines. Can LeBron James finally bring his home city of Cleveland their first championship in franchise history? Or will the Splash Brothers put a historic cap on a record-setting season by going back-to-back? And what about the rest of the offseason news, from the coaching hires to the future of Kevin Durant? Adam Gracia is the executive producer of the Chris Maddox Show on NBC Sports. He spent part of his Friday appearing on the Two Man Advantage podcast to get you up to date on all the latest news and notes surrounding the association. So, Adam, first of all, I want to take the opportunity and welcome you to the Two Man Advantage podcast, and we're excited to talk some playoff basketball with you this morning.
Hey, Kevin, I appreciate you having me on.
So, just when we look at the finals and what happened last night in Game 1, obviously Golden State's bench played a big role in the win for them, and then Cleveland starters also had to play heavy minutes, and they didn't really get contributions from their bench. So can you just give me your general impressions and what you saw last night in Game 1 of the finals, and what you're expecting for the duration of the series?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we saw was that the Warriors are able to beat the Cavs when the Cavs have Kyrie Irving, they have Kevin Love playing, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson aren't really shooting the ball well. I mean, you've got Steph Curry, who was 3 of 8 from three-point. He was 4 of 15 from the game. He only had 11 points. Klay Thompson only had 9 points, but you saw a production from the bench where Iguodala had 12 points, Sean Livingston had 20 points, Leandro Barbosa had 11 points, and just everybody from the bench contributed. Whether they scored or they didn't score, they were doing stuff to help this team, and you didn't see that from the Cavs at all. I mean, the Cavs bench only had 10 points, and they're not going to be able to win games that way, even if Steph and Klay aren't shooting the ball well. They're going to need more production from their bench.
Can you just give me your general impressions on the matchup between Curry and LeBron during this series, and all of the hype and star power surrounding this series?
Yeah, I mean, I think LeBron sort of said it before Game 1. Somebody asked him about the rivalry between him and Steph, and really it's not a matchup of Steph and LeBron, because one, they're not really guarding each other too much during the game. They play different positions. But you do see that whenever Steph gets caught matching up against LeBron, when LeBron has the ball, it's just LeBron just overpowers him. He just forces himself down low and gets an easy bucket. But if LeBron is guarding Steph outside, he may be able to stop Steph from shooting because he's a big, tough defender. But there's a mismatch somebody else, whether it's down low, whether it's with Draymond Green or Harrison Barnes or Andrew Bogut. There's a mismatch somewhere else, and Steph may not be hitting the three, but he's also not taking the three because he's finding the mismatch and getting an easy two somewhere else.
Now, when we look at off-season headlines, obviously the big one for the NBA is what's going to happen with Kevin Durant and losing in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, certainly one game before the NBA Finals. How do you think the loss in Game 7 will affect his decision, and where do you think he'll end up this offseason?
I think that with Kevin Durant, it was an issue of how far they were going to go during the playoffs that would help him make his decision this offseason. And I've got sources telling me that Kevin Durant knows that his team can beat the Spurs. They did it during the playoffs. Knows that his team can take the Warriors to 7 games. They did that during the playoffs. So he knows that his team can win. It's just a matter of whether or not the Thunder are going to get another player or two to build around, maybe to come off the bench. They've got Enes Kanter, who's young. All their starters are young. Serge Ibaka looks great. We all know that Russell Westbrook, he's an MVP caliber player. So he's got tools in the starting lineup. And I mentioned Enes Kanter coming off the bench. He's only going to get better. He's still in his low 20s. He's only going to get better. So I think that from what my sources are telling me, that they do think that Kevin Durant is going to be coming back, even if it's just for a one-year deal, and then seeing what Russell Westbrook does the year after, because he'll be a free agent. But I think next year we'll see Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City.
And what other headlines during the offseason will you be keeping an eye on?
Obviously, the coaching moves. We saw Scott Brooks with the Wizards. We saw Tom Thibodeau in Minnesota. Recently, we saw Jeff Hornacek just sign with the Knicks, which I thought was really interesting because we all know that Phil Jackson wants to run the triangle, and who knows if Jeff Hornacek can actually run the triangle. So I thought that was interesting, and we'll see how that ends up playing out. But really, I mean, it's been the coaching moves, and it's been how are we going to get to the finals matchup that we want and that we now have between the Warriors and the Cavs that everybody's been focusing on. And
could you just give me your general impressions on both the Raptors and Pistons playoff run? For our viewers, obviously those are the local teams that we're focused on down here. So what do you think of both the Raptors and the Pistons moving forward?
I mean, I think that the Raptors, they've got a very bright future moving forward. Obviously, the question is with DeMar DeRozan, he's going to be a free agent, and the question is whether or not he wants to return to Toronto. Once again, my sources have told me that he loves Toronto. He calls it home. But the issue is, and it may sound silly, but how much is the cold weighing on him? He's an LA guy, where he grew up. It was where he went to school. So he may want to go back to Los Angeles and play with the Lakers. So I think that right now Toronto's in the driver's seat with them, and obviously if he stays, the future will be bright, very bright for the Raptors. Kyle Lowry had a few rough games during the playoffs, which we all know about, but he's a great player. Patrick Peterson's very good. Bismack Biyombo, if they can re-sign him, he really came on strong during the postseason. Damari Carroll was injured for a lot of the year, but we all know what he can give. And Jonas Valanciunas, who was hurt during the last series, is a dominant player. So if they can re-sign a couple of guys, obviously with DeMar DeRozan being their number one priority, the future is definitely bright for them.
And just your general thoughts on Detroit as well?
Yeah, I mean, Detroit's a young team. They showed a lot of people during this postseason that even though first of all, they made it to the postseason, which was great to see. But even though they got swept by Cleveland, they put up a fight, I would say, most of the games. They've got Aaron Baines, who comes off the bench and is obviously backing up Andre Drummond. But Aaron Baines is a strong guy off the bench, and he'll only get better. Andre Drummond obviously is a double-double guy, and I know that Stan Van Gundy expects a lot out of him. Marcus Morris, very dominant player. They picked up Tobias Harrison, who's been great for them. And, I mean, I think that they are also very young, and the future with them, I mean, it's only going to get better for the Pistons.
And I know we talked earlier about the coaching moves, and we talked about the Knicks and Hornacek taking over that team. I'm interested to know your thoughts. Last time we talked about Luke Walton taking over the Lakers, and Luke having sort of the keys to the car to one of the league's most premier franchises, and they've been sort of on a downward spiral lately. And with Kobe gone, they obviously have the money to be aggressive in free agency. So what do you think is the future for the Lakers under Walton, who is a first-time head coach but knows the bloodlines there as well?
Well, I mean, I think you hit on it when you said they're going to have some money, obviously with Kobe being gone, and it's what they do during free agency, which is going to be key. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, they're not doing anything until after July 1st. Luke Walton's not doing anything with the Lakers until his run with the Warriors is over. But one thing that I think Laker fans really need to know is just because Luke Walton, who is an assistant with Golden State right now, is going to be your new head coach, that doesn't mean that he's going to be running the same offense that Golden State does. No other team other than the Warriors have Steph Curry and have Draymond Green and have Klay Thompson. So anybody that thinks that Luke Walton's going to be running the same offense that the Warriors have is going to be sadly mistaken. So I think you need to sit back. It's not going to. I don't think he's going to get the. He's not going to get this Lakers team to the playoffs in the first year. Probably not the second year. Maybe not the third year. But you got to be patient with him because we saw he does know what he's doing. I mean, he's been an assistant now with the Warriors since 2014. He was with Memphis a couple years prior. He's going to be a good coach. You just have to be patient with him and let him build this Lakers team the way that he wants to. And maybe he'll try to make it look like the Warriors, but it's not going to be the Warriors. So you may see some things, some plays, the way that they run up and down the court like the Warriors, but it's not going to be that same type of offense. So you just have to be patient with them.
And when we look at another interesting off-season story, it'll be Dwight Howard. Obviously, Houston hired Mike D'Antoni as their new head coach. And there has been rumblings that he might be interested in going back to Orlando. So what do you foresee as the future for Dwight Howard for this offseason and maybe for the rest of his career?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the hiring of Mike D'Antoni, and sources are telling me that Dwight Howard's not going back to Houston. The two guys, Howard and D'Antoni, don't like each other, so the possibility of Dwight Howard returning to Houston is pretty much just not there at all. But one thing that Dwight Howard's going to want, he's going to want a max deal. He hasn't been playing like a max player, but with the salary cap going up, he wants to get max money. He thinks that he will get max money, and the way that the NBA works, he likely will get max money. So the issue or the question is, where is he going to get that money? There are teams. Maybe he'll go back to the Lakers. You mentioned Orlando. It'd be nice to see him go back to Orlando where he started his career. So I think once July 1st starts or comes and the free agency opens up, I think we'll see a lot more fall into place. But I think you definitely need to keep your eye on the Lakers, on the Magic, because I think those are probably two of the top teams that Dwight Howard might possibly go to.
Just two more questions for you. One of them is about circling back to the finals. And what happens in your mind if Cleveland doesn't win this championship in the minds of LeBron and having all of these big contracts, paying Tristan Thompson over $80 million a year, Kevin Love makes over $100 million, but obviously the big elephant in the room is LeBron. So what do you think will be the perception if Cleveland doesn't win, or if they do?
I think that LeBron knew that when he wrote his letter in Sports Illustrated with Lee Jenkins, that he knew coming back to Cleveland, he wasn't going to be able to leave again. And he knew that if he ever did leave again, there was no shot of him ever returning to Cleveland. So I don't think there's going to be a question whether or not LeBron comes or re-signs with Cleveland. But I think the bigger question will be what happens with Kevin Love. We all know what's going on the last couple of years between Kevin Love and LeBron James, the cryptic tweets, whatever he's saying during press conferences, and the relationship has just been very rocky. So I think that if the Cavs don't win against Golden State, and clearly they need to play a lot better than they did last night, then I think the Cavs are going to start looking at possibly trading Kevin Love and see what they can get for him. So I think that's going to be the biggest offseason move for the Cavs if they don't beat the Warriors during the finals.
And my final question for you has to do with what do you think we'll see during the upcoming draft in the NBA?
I mean, obviously the bigger names that you see are Brandon Ingram. You've got Ben Simmons. So I think the biggest thing will be to see where those guys go, whether it's 1 and 2, who goes 1, who goes 2. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what moves, because after the top 2, 3, 4 guys, the draft isn't that deep. So I think it'll be interesting to see what you see trade-wise, who looks to be active. Boston obviously has a bunch of picks in the first round. Are they going to be looking to trade some picks, or do they go with a Dragon Bender type who's an international guy? Or do they go Buddy Hield, who we all know what he did during the postseason or in the NCAA tournament? So I think those will be the biggest things. Obviously, Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, 1 and 2. I think Philadelphia has their mind up with Ben Simmons. But after 1 and 2, I think it's going to be a crapshoot, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know how many teams are interested in these guys that are the Chris Dunns out of Providence, the Jamal Murray out of Kentucky. I don't know how many people are actually interested in them, and how many people want to see what they can get for the number 4, 5, 6, 7 pick. Maybe they can get some other veteran guys to help their team get to the next level.
Adam, we want to thank you for your time this morning and for joining us to talk NBA basketball on the Two Man Advantage podcast.
You got it, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Have a great weekend, and thanks for your time, buddy. Bye-bye.
You got it. Thanks. Bye.